So good to be here today and seeing everyone and joining together and edifying one another and encouraging one another and loving one another. Good things continue to happen here at Hampton Church of Christ. Some of the good things it is that Larry gave up announcements, and I thought he might mention tomorrow is his anniversary. He and Maggie have been married 46 years, and Maggie's only 39 years old, and so I don't know how that is possible. But they do celebrate that. That's a great thing to have that celebration and that great example of 46 years of marriage. And people today are getting married and getting divorced and not seeing how is it that you can live with the same person 46 years. Well, you just do. And that's a great example for our young people. We wish you a happy anniversary and congratulations to you. Good things continue to happen as far as prayers being answered. We have Nick and Judy Blaine's great-grandson, we know last week, had an infection in his leg and foot and toe and everything, and that is progressing along and healing, and he is home. We're just saying getting better. And so we appreciate prayers on that. We have Ashley Kirkpatrick we had announced last week she fell and outside they were grilling outside, and she had a tray and she tripped over something and her hands went into the burner, the grill. Anyway, she's progressing along as far as that and getting better in that, and so we're thankful the prayers been answered on that part. Got her on our prayers, and that continued just good things happening. We lift one another in prayer, and we're thankful when God does answer our prayers the way that we think He ought to answer prayers. Sometimes the way He answers prayers are not the way that we think He ought to answer them, but God's way is the best way, and we humble and yield to that. We're in James chapter 5, and I put up this from Romans chapter 12. I'm not going to Romans, but as we talk about James chapter 5, this is a good verse as Paul kind of says again what James is saying as James is writing the letter. Paul kind of sums up this: to rejoice in hope. Don't give up in hope. Keep on keeping on. Hope, 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 hope. Our great hope is continuing, and our great hope is in the future. Don't give up on our hope. But during our time of hoping, we're also patient in this time. And James deals with this time of being patient. To patient in prayer and patient for answered prayers. Patient in living the Christian life. Things just don't happen on our timetable sometimes, as James would say. And be constant in prayer. Continue on in prayer during the times of when we don't see hope fulfilled. We walk by faith, not by sight. And sometimes we don't see the things that God sees. But keep on hoping. Keep on being patient in prayer. Keep on being patient in living the Christian life. That our timetable is not God's timetable, and vice versa. But continue, keep on, keeping on. So we're going to leave this up just for a little bit as we talk about the book of James. Just to set the setting, James chapter 5, verse 1 and through verse 6 talks about the poor being oppressed. We talked about that last week. Those who were rich were oppressing the poor. They were taking advantage of the poor. That you see, you had really two classes of economic situations, those who were very poor and those who were very rich. There was really no middle class there in that situation. Much like we have today, we have a lot of middle class and are blessed with that. But either you were very poor or very rich. And so it was that we had a lot of those who were poor in the church. That message of you are valued or you are something, that Jesus paid His life for you, meant something to them. When you were ransomed, when you were bought, they understood that because they were slaves. And those who were poor, the message of freedom rang true with those in the church who were poor. And so there were many who were poor, and because they were poor, sometimes it was that they needed a little bit more to get by, and they would borrow from the rich, and the rich were taking advantage of this and oppressing them. And so they had that situation even in the church. You would have that situation. And so James talks about this, and told them to keep on keeping on. Rejoice in hope, be patient in tribulation, be constant in prayer. James could have written those same words, James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. We have as he talks about the rich and the poor, I ran across another illustration that could have been used last week, but I'll use it this week. J. Paul Getty. I've often used illustrations of the Vanderbilts or others who gained their money during this particular time in building America. If you haven't watched The Men Who Built America, it's on the History Channel. There's a lot of illustrations can come from that. One is J. Paul Getty he talks about money. We talk about money in James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. And he says this about money. He said, I would give all the money I've ever earned. And he earned a lot of it. He was very poor, went from very poor to very rich. He said, I would give them all the money that I've ever earned if I could have one happy marriage. Isn't that an interesting quote? He found out that money is not everything. I would give all the money that I've ever earned to have one happy marriage. Larry and Maggie, you were richer than J. Paul Getty. Isn't that something? To have one happy marriage. And those who have had happy marriage and experienced 46 years or more, or even less, J. Paul Getty would say, you are richer than I am. Money is not everything. And he found that out. And we find that out too. That the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's not that it's money, it's the love of money. It's not that having money, it's when money has you where we find out that we go wrong. And they had a situation in James chapter 5, 1 through 6 about those having money or money having them were misusing that. And those who were oppressed. I think of the book of Revelation. In Revelation chapter 6, verse 10, we have a situation there where there were souls being oppressed, not by those who were rich, but those who were powerful. And they were losing their life because they lived their life for Jesus. And they were under the altar or under the throne crying out, how long before we see you, O Lord, avenge us? Revelation 6, verse 10. I'm paraphrasing there. But they're crying out, how long? Lord, you've promised you shall avenge us. And here in James chapter 5, God makes that same promise. That those will seek their due in due time, in the Lord's time and not our time. But in Revelation 6, verse 10, you see these souls crying out from the altar, how long, how long? I can see this in the book of James chapter 5. How long? And Paul in Romans chapter 12 says, be patient in tribulation. Our timing is not always God's timing. And God's timing is not always our timing. And so we read there in verse 7 of James chapter 5, be patient therefore, and therefore is based upon what happened in the first 6 verses. I know that you're being oppressed. I know that life is not fair with you. I know that living the Christian life sometimes didn't make your situation better. Sometimes it's even worse than living the Christian life, that you have tribulation heaped upon you. But in that, he said, therefore, based on that, even though that you're oppressed, be patient. Even though things aren't going the way that you think that they ought to be going, be patient. Therefore, be patient. Hard to be patient, isn't it? We talked about that in our Bible class this morning. In Thessalonians chapter 5, Paul says to be patient. And we concluded that we are very patient for a certain amount of time. For a certain amount of allotted time, we have this little circle where we are patient. And as long as things happen in that timetable, in our own little circle, we're very patient. But whenever it's an extended period of time, longer than what we think ought to happen, that we grow impatient. And sometimes it is Christians were thinking about, Lord, aren't you going to do something about this situation? And God says, in my time I will. And we think, well, Lord, isn't it about time? You know, I'm about to run out of patience waiting on you, Lord. We ever been in that situation? Lord, I prayed about this, and it's about time you answer that prayer. I've given you 2 weeks, right? Or maybe 2 years. Or maybe sometimes 200 years or even 400 years as the Israel were slaves in Egypt. In 400 years, God answered their prayers. Be patient unto the coming of the Lord. He's speaking to those who are oppressed. He's saying, be patient until the coming of the Lord. You see, Judgment Day is a day that's coming, that we know is coming. And though it's been 2,000 years and it hasn't come yet, don't lose patience. He's coming. Judgment Day is coming. And everyone will receive the things which we have done in our body, whether it be good or bad. Judgment Day is coming. There's a day promised, and it could be that Jesus comes again. Thessalonians talks about that. When Jesus comes again, it could be that we shall see him, the dead in Christ, rise first. It could be then, or it could be that as it talks about in Thessalonians, that some have passed on, and Judgment Day didn't happen in their lifetime. It may be that we pass on, and Judgment Day doesn't happen in our lifetime, or it may be it happens in our lifetime. But be patient until the coming of the Lord. Many people have tried to get God's timing on our timing. I'm going to give 3 examples of this. In 1988, a book came out, and it said this: 88 reasons why Jesus will come in 1988. Judgment Day is coming. Judgment Day is coming in 1988, and here's 88 reasons why it's coming then. I've got that book, a little book that I have. I happened upon it at a good time, and I have preserved that and kept that. And it says 88, you can go through there, 88 reasons it gives why Jesus is coming in 1988. And then there's a second book that came out because he didn't come in 1988. But people have tried to put God's timing on our timing. The second example is this one. Are you ready for the rapture? Jesus is coming October 28th, 1992. He didn't come in 1988. They miscalculated. But he is coming again October 28th, 1992. Get ready. He's coming. You see, those in the book of James and those in the book of Thessalonians also had this constant expectation that Jesus is coming at any moment. At any time, he's coming. And it's been 2,000 years, and have we lost that sense of urgency that he's coming? Not that we can predict it is. Jesus said, no man knows, and I believe Jesus, because he didn't come in 1988. He didn't come in 1992, and so he didn't come in 1992. The last time that someone said Jesus is coming again is this last example. You saw billboards all over the place, didn't you? He is coming May 21st, 2011. And I took this particular one because it says the Bible guarantees it. Right. Well, the Bible doesn't guarantee he's coming in 2011. The Bible doesn't guarantee he's coming in 2021. The Bible does guarantee he's coming again on his timing and not our timing. And so he's telling those in the book of James, he said, I know the Lord is coming. Be patient. It may happen while you're living. It may happen at a later date. It happens now, and I could say the same thing now. It may happen while you're living. It may happen at another date, but it will happen. Be assured of this. The Bible does guarantee it's going to be in God's timing and not our timing. And so he gives the example of the farmer in this, in patience. A farmer does not go out and plant a seed and come out the next day and expect that seed to be full grown. you would say, what? If some farmer, if you heard of some farmer saying, well, I planted yesterday, I don't know why I can't go out and harvest tomorrow. You would say, that farmer's got a lot to learn, doesn't he? Jesus said, and then James also says, Jesus says about sowing the seed, using the example of a farmer sowing the seed. The seed is the Word of God. We sow the seed. Well, he gives an example. The husbandman or the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth and has long patience for it until he receives the early and the latter rain. You see, the farmer understands that whenever you plant that seed, it's going to take a little bit of time for that seed to produce. But it will produce. The law of natures. You plant a seed, it produces bountifully. You plant one seed. Someone once said, you can count the seeds in an apple. You can cut that apple open, count the seeds. But you cannot count how many apples in a seed. You can count the seeds in an apple, but you cannot count the apples in a seed. And we go out and we sow the seed. We sow. And we don't know, cannot imagine the reaping. But here he said, be patient. Be patient. The time is coming. I know the world's in bad shape. I've watched the news. Well, that's all you ever hear, isn't it? Or it's a pitiful situation. That's all we ever hear in the news is bad things that happen. World's in bad shape. And that's kind of what Jesus said. When things get bad enough, I'm coming. And we think, wow, can it get any worse than this? People are rejecting the Word and rejecting Christianity and the church and God and the Bible and prayer and all that's associated with religion. And can it get any worse? And maybe the people in James are talking about, can it get any worse than this? Jesus said through James, be patient. Be patient until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits, and we wait too. He said in verse 8, be patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord draweth nigh. And so he said, be also patient, and establish your heart. And so he said two things. One thing in verse 7, he said, be patient and wait. Hey, our timing is not God's timing. Be patient like the farmer. Be patient and wait. And then verse 8, he said, be patient and work. And while you were being patient, don't be inactive. He said in verse 8, be patient, establish your heart. As you're being patient and as you're waiting for his coming again, work. Be active. There are things to do as you're patient. The farmer doesn't plant his seed and say, well, I'm going to be patient for that seed to grow. He's got to cultivate it. He's got to fertilize it. He's got to water it. He's got to be patient for that fruit to grow up, but he also has to work for that fruit to grow up. And so as he said, be patient. Number one, wait. Number two, work. Establish your heart. He says, grow in faith as he's doing. Establish your heart. Be patient. It's important to us to as he deals with faith in practice. That's the book of James. As we are patient, put our faith into practice. Do the things, and that's really what the book of James deals with. It's practical Christianity. Living every day as a Christian. Being patient until the coming of the Lord, but being active, living the Christian life. And he deals with all kinds of situations as we discovered in the book of James. How to deal with one another and not dealing with someone, judging someone on the outside instead of the inside. How to deal with tribulations in life. How to deal with temptation. How to deal with oppression. How to deal with a lot of things in life. The book of James. So be patient, number one, wait. Be patient, number two, work. In verse 9, in that working, he says, grudge not against one another, brethren, lest you be condemned. Behold, the judge standeth at the door. It's to deal with each other in the right way, holding a grudge toward one another. What he's saying is don't murmur and complain against one another. We've got a job to do. And then he gives the example of the prophets. Take my brethren, the prophets, who have spoken in the name of the Lord, for an example of suffering, afflictions, and of patience. As we are patient, remember Romans chapter 12, be patient in tribulation. James says the prophets were patient, but they were in tribulation. James is saying just because you become a Christian does not mean everything's fine. We'll never face any trouble or trial or tribulation or heartache or sorrow or oppression, as he said in verses 1 through 6, chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. And so take example, the prophets. They suffered, number one. Number two, they endured. They suffered, they endured. That hits home with a lot of us, doesn't it? Is anyone out here suffering? We're going to talk about that later on in James chapter 5. If any afflicted, that's what he says. Do we have any who are suffering? But you're not the only ones. Take, for example, the prophets. Those who've gone on before, James would say. They suffered, but they endured. They did not give up hope. They were patient in tribulation. Don't give up hope. Though it is that God is not on our timetable, God is. God does answer prayers. God is our helper. God is with us. Don't give up hope. The prophets didn't, and we shouldn't either. And then he said in verse 11, behold, we count them happy which endure. Now, James is not saying everyone that is facing tribulation and troubles and trial is happy, has a great big smile on my face. Boy, let me tell you about the trouble I'm going through today. I've really had a hard life here, and I've been oppressed, and I've been persecuted, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad that happened. It's not saying that. Happy is the King James translation of that word, but it also means blessed. The Beatitudes that Jesus talks about, the same word is used here. You are blessed. When we go through these trials and temptations and troubles and heartaches and sorrow in life, and God is the judge. And so he said, we count them blessed which endure. Those who don't give up hope. Those who don't faint. Those who don't quit. Those who don't turn their back on God. Because sometimes it is, when we face troubles in life, and sometimes people say, well, why is this happening to me? Why is God letting this happen to me? And if God is letting this happen to me, I'll just forsake God. I don't want a God that gives us any kind of trouble or tribulation in life. And James chapter 1 talks about the purpose of trials and tribulation. It's to help us grow, and we do grow in tribulation. When we're pressed to the limit, we come forth victorious, and we grow, and we endure. Happy, not happy that they have a smile on their face, and they're so happy they're being persecuted. No, they're blessed when they endure. You've heard the patience of Job. I've seen the end of the Lord. The Lord is very pitiful. Now, our English translation of pitiful is different from this meaning of this word being compassionate. Maybe some of your versions said the Lord is very compassionate. And that's the sense there. He cares. We have a God who cares. He knows our sorrow and our heartaches and our tribulation, and God cares. 1 Peter 5:7 says, casting all your care upon him, for he careth for you. He cares. He is very compassionate. And He is very full of tender mercy, very kind also. God is not a hard-hearted God. He's not a God who cannot be touched by the things which we're going through, Hebrews chapter 4. And so, verse 11 says, we are blessed. Some of the things happen to us that can actually be a blessing. Strengthen us and help us and encourage us, or that we can strengthen or help or encourage someone else going through this time. He uses the example of Job. Do you think Job was happy when all these things happened to him? You think as those servants came up and said, you've lost all your flock, you've lost all of your possessions, you've lost all your family, that Job would say, boy, I'm happy to hear that. No. Don't you know his heart was grieved because he heard that? But he was blessed because he endured. And Job is an example for us today. Just like you can be an example for someone else today. Take, for example, the prophet Job. John chapter 16, verse 33, Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation. But be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. That's what they needed to hear in James chapter 5. Be patient. Wait, but be patient. Work. Don't give up. But above all things, brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, or neither by earth, neither by any oath, and let your yea be yea, or your nay be yea, lest you fall into condemnation. In two ways he says on this. Number one, when he says, swear not, neither by heaven or earth. We use the word swear many times in using the word, we would say profanity or cussing. He's not talking about that here. He's talking about taking an oath, and in using that in swearing is one way we can look at that. That you neither swear that or adding the Lord's name to add to some truth would be the definition of that. By the gold or the temple is what Jesus would say about those who were the Pharisees. You say something by the, I swear by the gold of the temple that this is true. He's saying you ought to live such a life that when you say it's true, that it is true. You heard about the boy crying wolf, that old Aesop's fable story, if you haven't heard. You know, the young lad was out watching sheep and he got bored or whatever, and so he cried, wolf, wolf, and all the villagers come, but there was no wolf. They admonished him for that, went back to the village. A few days later, he cries, wolf again, wolf, wolf, and all the villagers come out, but there's no wolf. The third time he cries wolf, there is a wolf, but none of the villagers come out because they can't trust him. He's lied to us before, he'll lie to us again. He said, let your yea be yea, your yes be yes. We don't have to add God's name to it to assure it or swear by the gold of the temple or swear by God's name to assure it's true. The second is when it is profanity and cussing, where people would say profanity, 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 or cussing, 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 and they would add the words by God to that to say, well, all this that I have said is true. And we've heard it used like that. He's just saying, let your word be your word. Your yea be yea. We don't have to cuss and say, my God, to say that it's true. Or we don't have to swear an oath by the name of the Lord for it to be true. Just that you live in such a way that when you say something, people know it's truth. Talking about our lifestyle. So I want to end on this note. We talked about Romans chapter 12 earlier. I'm going to go to Galatians chapter 6 to end this up. think Paul and James are saying along the same line as this. Sometimes we get tired in life. Trouble and tribulation and heartache wears on us, grows weary. It's a burden that we bear. It's a heavy burden. Sometimes you're going through heavy burdens. James chapter 5, verses 1 through 6 is a heavy burden upon the poor, and they're oppressed. But he said, be patient, wait, and be patient, work. Let us not grow weary in well-doing and doing good. Don't grow tired of doing good. You do good in all your situations. You do good when you feel like it. You do good when you don't feel like it. You do good when things are going well. You do good when things aren't going well. Don't quit doing good. You're like the farmer. You plant the seed. Now you've got to work at cultivating that seed to bring forth a harvest. And a harvest time will come in God's time, not our time. In due season, it says. In God's timing, we will reap. So don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give out. Don't give in. God's timing, it is there. In the book of James, he says, don't give up. In God's timing, I wish I knew when it is. But God knows, and it's good that I don't. I don't know when it is that the judgment day is coming, that he'll return. I don't know when it is that those who oppress others, whether it be with money or power or position or whatever situation it is, that they will receive their due reward. I don't know when that timing is, but God knows, and God is right in his judgment. Let's put our faith in God. That's what he's saying. Don't give up. Don't faint. Don't quit. God's way is the right way. That's what the book of James is about. We're choosing God's way or the world's way. God's way, it's right. Don't give up. Next week, I'll be gone to hold a gospel meeting at Stamps, and I'll be back the week after, and we'll finish up with the book of James and talk about that. Daniel, you may teach on James. I don't know. We'll have that. But I'll miss you next week. I know Daniel will do a great job. He does. Well, we're blessed. Blessed to have Daniel and Carrie. But if you can see a situation where you've lost patience, man, I tell you, I just thought it would be this way, and God would answer my prayer this way, and things would happen. I thought it would be on this timetable, and I'm just giving up hope. Don't give up hope. Maybe it is we need to pray for patience, and maybe it is publicly you need to say, would you pray for me? Well, I'm just going through a time when I think I'm just tired and weary, and I'm about to quit. And I need your prayers. Or maybe personally you're going through this and you're having this inner resolve. Okay, I'm going to keep on keeping on. I'm not going to quit. Things happen. Things haven't happened in my life the way that I thought that they were going to happen, but I'm not going to give up on God. Well, I'm going to commit again. Maybe right now you're making that commitment right now. But if we can help you publicly in any way, won't you come right now while we stand and while we sing?